As I'm recording this morning, it is November 7th. 1 month ago today, we woke up to the horrendous news of what was happening in Israel. To say that for most of us, probably it has been a very difficult month watching I kind of feel like I'm back into 2021 and years like that when we were out of adjectives to describe the time of COVID. And once again, we're in a time in which we're out of adjectives to describe the horrendous events that have happened over the last month. Not just what has happened regarding the massacre, the kidnappings, all of that, but it's happening all over the world with the anti-Semitism. I've talked to Kathy, I've talked to others. Hanok, I'll be online with him, of course, tomorrow morning, God willing, with another Israel update. I hope you're keeping up with those. What has been astounding to me is the rapid rise of anti-Semitism. Now, I understand that some of these are paid people and all that. Yeah, I don't need to get into the conspiracies. But the very fact that this could come as fast as it is, I think this might have been maybe what they experienced in Germany the day after Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. To see that the world has changed so much in just a short amount of time. And for anyone that is thinking, well, it's going to go back to normal, just remember what COVID did and then multiply that a few times. You know, people are still wearing masks. I was in Lowe's yesterday, somebody's still wearing a mask. There is no such thing as normal this side of the kingdom. There's not been anything normal. The world has not been normal since Adam and Hava decided to break the first law, the first instruction in the garden of don't eat of that tree. So let's don't look for normal, let's look for this kingdom. Before I get going this week on the Torah portion of the life of Sarah, Sarah, I want to, just in case he happens to be, I'm going to mention someone, and in case he happens to get a hold of this broadcast this week, one of the fruit, there is fruit that's coming out of this horrendous time, and I got to watch part of that yesterday, is a dear friend, a brother, Tommy Waller of Hayavel. I've known Tommy for longer than either one of us want to mention. Tommy was invited yesterday, Monday, to a prayer meeting at the Great Synagogue in Jerusalem. And standing there as yes, Tommy, a redneck farmer from Tennessee, who back in 2004, in what most would call a chance meeting up on Har Brakah, the Mount of Blessing, when he met with Nir Levi at what was back then what we called the Shack, it was some place you didn't really want to go, is now the beautiful visitor center. And Tommy looked out at the hills of Samaria and the vineyards that were growing there and said to Nir, what can I do to help? That is now turned into, this is almost 20 years later, this is now turned into an organization of Hayavel, and the amazing work that's being done in the hills of Samaria, Judea, literally all over Israel. And I listened yesterday, you can go on YouTube, and you can find it, prayer meeting, prayer for Israel, don't know really how it's listed, but Tommy was, I believe, one of the last speakers there. And Tommy's words were great, but Tommy's passion, as he stood there in a place that, if I'd have told him when I first met him back in the early 2000s that one day you'll be speaking at the Great Synagogue, he would have definitely looked at me like the cow looking at a new gate. So Tommy Waller and all of the people that have been involved with Hayavel, thank you so much for the work that has been done through the years. All right, the life of Sarah. Of course, it's kind of a misnomer here because it begins in chapter 23. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. These were the years of Sarah's life. So the Torah portion is called Sarah, or Sarah's life, but it is about her death, which really brings us to an interesting place. And I've kind of followed these Torah portions through this month and the events, and anyone who has not seen the parallels that are within the Torah portions, either they're just totally blind, or they're just looking at the words and not in any way studying them or internalizing them in any way. So here we have this thing called the death, Torah portion of the life of Sarah, but it is the death of Sarah. And it brings us to a very maybe sobering statement regarding our life, is that the impact of our life will never truly be understood until our death. Now, I've never been an artist. The only thing I can draw is flies. But, anybody knows that most authors, artists, their works are not really appreciated to the fullest extent until after the person is dead. This is true of songwriters, of musicians, of various people, but it's with us all, that our life will not truly be understood until the time of our death. Sarah lived a very full, in the end, extremely fruitful life for a woman who only had one child. But Sarah's life is much more than that, because all through Scripture, from this point, we read about our father Abraham, even over into the book of Romans, speaking to a Gentile or former Gentile audience. It says, our father Abraham. Speaking in the book of Yaakov or James, it says, our father Abraham. But what about our mother Sarah? What about this amazing woman that stood with the man Abraham? I'm all too aware of the fact that a lot of what, I guess I better rephrase that. The father was very wise 42 years ago to give me the wife that I needed. I did not understand or appreciate that at the time. I do now, because of the work. I mean, Kathy has been in the background, and she'll get after me on this one after she watches, but that's okay. It won't be the first time. But through the years, my face, my voice has been the one that's out there. People think of Join to Hashem, the ministry, and they think of my name. But the truth is, there is an amazing woman that's behind all of this, who has, for years, walked the dog, changed the diapers, raised children when I was out on the road doing all kinds of things, of traveling and teaching and seeing the world. She was seeing she was in the back end of the baby and the cat litter and all of those things. So I think of Sarah, and I think of how amazing of a woman she was, that she stood behind Abraham this whole time. Never really, I don't guess, we don't read about this, complaining that she has not received the notoriety. She never said, hey, by the way, it's, I'm the one over here. No, she just continued on in the role that she was called to do, so that Abraham could fulfill the role that he was called to. Now, this brings us to a very interesting thing in our world today, and it's called the word order. The number one institution that has been from the beginning and is attacked today at the greatest level of any institution, that is that of the family. It's been attacked in various ways, not just through the overt things that we see in the media, but in some very subtle ways. We see this in commercials. It's normally in commercials you see the man, if he is a father, if the two are actually married, well, the man's never driving the car in the commercial anymore. The man is as was. I've never actually watched a complete episode and don't plan to, but what I saw from people that told me of The Simpsons and various other places, that men are portrayed today as a bunch of buffoons. Now, the problem lies in that if the shoe fits, wear it. Because for many families, and I wish I could say that that Christianity, that Judaism, that Messianic Hebrew roots communities are void of this, but there are still the overriding men are not standing up. Men are not standing in their place. The emasculation of men. Now let's look over to some scriptures, and these are verses that only crazy people go to these verses, and that's why I'm going to do it. Because in 1 Peter, you may not, in the life of feminism today, I can't even say the word, which is fine with me. In the life of feminism and the emasculation of men, these verses, you're probably not going to hear these preached on a Saturday or Sunday because of the fallout that it would take. But you can ignore them if you want. It's like I asked a friend of mine years ago about Ezekiel chapter 37, the two sticks coming together, and I said, what do you do with those verses? He was totally against the whole message of the two houses, the two kingdoms, and I said, what do you do with those verses? He said, I ignore them. Okay, well, that's not going to make them go away. And so here, let me just read to you 6 or 7 verses. In the same way, wives, submit to your husbands, so that even if some of them do not believe the word, they will be won over by their conduct without saying anything. I did a message not too long ago, interview online about this and the fruit of what we saw in our congregation with a couple. As they see your respective and pure behavior, your beauty should not consist in externals such as fancy hairstyles, gold jewelry, that you or what you wear. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't look nice. Okay, this is not taking us to the old Pentecostal ways of you can't this has to be here and that has to be there and you can't do this. That's a pendulum swing, and now the pendulum swing going back the other way. Any of you that remember the early days of the Praise the Lord program or TBN, that pendulum swung so far over, about broke the silly thing. Rather, let it be the inner character of your heart with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit. In God's sight, this is a great value. This is how the holy women of the past who put their hope in Elohim used to adorn themselves and submit to their husbands. That the way Sarah obeyed Abraham, honoring him as her Lord, her Adonai. You and her daughters, if you do what is right, do not succumb to fear. Now, guys, you husbands likewise conduct your married lives with understanding. Although your wife may be, and David Stern puts in, weaker physically, I won't go into all of that there is probably here, but let's just go with that's another teaching on its own. I don't want to go to there today. Maybe weaker. I'm just going to leave it there. You should respect her as a fellow heir of the gift of life. If you don't, your prayers will be hindered. To use the word King James of hindered, or David Stern of blocked, your prayers will be blocked. So this is speaking of order in the home. Wow, I could spend, days and days teaching on this. I remember quite a few years ago, I was pastoring, a person I knew asked me, him and his girlfriend were going to get married. I knew them well enough, and in that day I didn't have quite the standard I do today for officiating a wedding. So I did the wedding, and it was funny because I don't let the bride and groom see my notes and vows and things like that. I didn't at that time at all. People were not writing their own vows. And I'll never forget in the vows saying, repeat after me, you are to love, honor, and obey. And when I said the word obey, that gal looked at me with fire in her eyes. And she knew she was trapped because she's standing right there in front of a group of people. And when she said the words obey, it was like this smoke coming out of her mouth because of the fire that was inside of her. And I don't think she ever really forgave me for that one. But it doesn't matter what our opinion is of things. This is God's order. Now, for many people out there today, it's not about walking in order, it's about restoring order. How do you restore order to a broken family? How do you restore order to a broken person? These are all things that we must submit unto the Father. That we look at these verses of 1 Peter, we look through the scriptures and we see the order, and we should be asking ourselves, not the question of, this is how what's happened, and so I'm here, and there's no way. We should be asking ourselves, how do we put ourselves back into that order? That no matter if you're single mom, a single dad, widowed, widower, there's always a way to put God's order back into our lives. The key is, do we want that order? It doesn't mean that you have to, get remarried. It may not, as Paul talks about. Maybe that's not something you're supposed to do. That does not mean that you get a pass on submitting to and seeking out how to walk in spiritual order before the Father. Now, again, I could go into this a lot. I'm just going to kind of leave it there and ask you to work on it. Husbands, wives, guys, husbands, don't, go back and read maybe some other verses here, because if you're not willing to give your life for your wife, then don't ever ask her to submit to you. This is not about abuse. This is not about, lording it, quote unquote, lording it over. This is about a very simple thing of loving someone so much that they want to give the greatest gift that they can give you, and that is their will. A measure of love that is given over because they understand that they're number one in your life. You're not. Okay, I'll move on. Now, in verse 7, starting verse 7 through the rest of the chapter, is this, Abraham, at this point, death brings not only an understanding of life, of the life of a person, but to those who are left behind, it brings priorities. We understand priorities. It is a time of a funeral. That I just had a person that I played golf with, just passed away yesterday. I would imagine that for his family, I don't know him well, I don't know the family, But they're going through priorities right now, trying to figure out how do we move forward without this person. If we've lived our life in a way that is worthy of life, it should be a task that is maybe not the easiest thing. That has to take some prayer and some even some counsel of, how do we move forward? Not because there was chaos left behind, but there was a great void. I'm thinking of Barry Phillips and his dad Charlie. When Charlie died, Barry Phillips' dad, when he died, I mean, it left a void in the whole family that is, I think, still to this day affecting, because his life was so huge in that family. That's the way that our life should be lived. So with Abraham, it is now the priorities, and first of all is, we got to find a place to bury the gal, and so he starts this negotiation process. And here in this chapter, we read about the first real estate transaction that has ever been, and this is for the cave of Machpelah and the field, which is now Hebron. Why is it here? Well, is it the tradition that Adam and Eve were buried there? He's going back to his roots. Why is it that the rest of the patriarchs, except for Rachel, were buried there? Could it be, they're going back to the roots? It's like when someone is buried. I just was in Florida, not during Sukkot. I went out to the cemetery where my mother is buried, my grandmother is buried, my great grandparents are buried, and I know what the grave markers say. I know what they look like. And I said to a friend of mine, I said, I went to the cemetery. He said, why? I said, seminary. He said, why? I said, just to honor, just to show my honor to those who have made my life possible. And so there is a place of honor. There's a place of reacquainting ourselves, wanting to stay connected to that which has given us life, those who have given us life. And that is what this Hebrew roots Messianic movement, by the way, should all be about in our day. Too bad it's been about other things. So, first real estate transaction, and we know that Abraham was paid an exorbitant price for it, and what are 400 shekels between friends, and that was basically saying, this is how much I want, and I know that it's more than it's worth, but we're standing here, and if you want it, that's what the price you're going to pay. Sometimes you got to step up to the plate. Sometimes we got to step up and do things that in our own thinking may sound a little bit exorbitant, extravagant, I guess would be the better word. But with Abraham, he was honoring his wife, and he was not going to allow a number in his checking account to keep him from honoring his wife in the way that she should be honored. Now, these priorities that are set forth, first of all, we gotta get her buried, and number two, by the way, that guy Isaac over there that's somewhere over 30, 35 years old about now, let's see, Abraham has been told that his descendants are going to be as the number of the stars in the heaven and the number of the sands of the sea. And, well, that's probably not happening right now because the boy's still single. So we got to find a wife for him. And Abraham does something very interesting. It's totally against our culture today that Abraham arranges the wedding. He doesn't ask Isaac where should we go to look for a wife? Have you signed up on Match.com or something like that? No, he puts his total trust in the God that has brought him to this place. That is a message that I could talk about with the guys on Life on Purpose for a long time. We've done a little bit of this. Are we willing, not just in our marriages, in our families, but are we willing in life to trust the Father above our own understanding? Well, God, I want this and this and this, and I'd like you to show it to me before I say yes to it. Well, with Abraham, not only is he putting total trust in Elohim, he's also putting total trust in his servant. Now, we're told it's thought that this is Eliezer, and maybe it could be, but we're not told that. The word Eliezer, the name Eliezer, does not come up here. It actually comes up in other areas. So the servant is told to, these gals are in this neighborhood. I don't want my son marrying anybody that's from here, which is interesting when you think about it, because he's telling him to go back to Ur of the Chaldees. Okay, he's telling him to go back to the place that Abram at the time was told to get out of. So this means that the people in Canaan at the time are worse than the people in Ur. Wow. So, think about that one for a moment. That Abram is not called out of Ur of the Chaldees because because the Father wants to bring him to a nicer neighborhood. No, he's going to bring him to his neighborhood so that Abram, becoming Abraham, becoming the 12 tribes, becoming Israel, can they then take possession of what is being given to them. And the people of the neighborhood don't really matter. This would be kind of like, you and I living in our nice little comfortable town, as I do, and I'm hoping that the Father doesn't get any ideas with what I'm about to say. But all of a sudden, I wake up one morning and hear, move to downtown San Francisco. It's like, what? Have you ever seen that place? I mean, this is. I know that there's some debauchery here in North Carolina, but really, you want me to go from here to there? That's like going from the trash can to the trash dump. Yeah, that's where I want you to go. So his move is not about getting to a nicer neighborhood. It's about owning a piece of land. Now, with the servant, we see this beautiful picture of Abraham becomes in the shadows of this, Abraham becomes a shadow of the Heavenly Father. He is the earthly father, but he is a shadow of the Heavenly Father. Isaac is a picture of the Messiah. The servant going forth into the world is a picture of the Spirit, and Rebecca is a picture of the bride of Messiah. What a beautiful painting. To think that all of the characters here line up with this spiritual realm that is happening. It's there for us to see if we will only see it. So this prophetic picture, though, has also an interesting character that comes out. And that is that Rebecca, she's got a brother, and her brother's name is Laban. Now, Laban means white, as Lot, his name we know meant veil, and so there was something about that veil that had to be taken off so that Abraham could walk in a way that was needed in that day. That was, you can go back to previous teachings there. And now we see that when the servant comes to the house, and here's Laban, the key part of the verse here is in verse 29 or 30, depending on your translation. Rivkah had a brother named Laban. When he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist beside, and he heard his sister Rivkah report of what the man had said to her, he ran out to the spring and found the man standing there with the camels. With the camels full of what? Gifts. The camels full of ka-ching, merchandise. So the picture is in a way tainted because we see that Laban comes along. What does Laban represent? Laban represents a place of discernment for each of us. That Rebecca, has to make a decision. I kind of think that she probably knew her brother fairly well. Living with a person, you get to know them. And so she has to make a decision whether to stay in her father's house with her brother Laban or to go with this stranger that she doesn't know. Now, the only thing she really knows at the moment is that a pretty nice guy that's got a lot of camels full of stuff. But what's the story? I mean, yeah, he's a relative. Okay, I've heard statements about this relative that left, a number of years ago. I don't know anything about him, except he's probably an old guy by now. I don't know anything about his son. I mean, is he cute or what? We don't know. She doesn't know. And so she has to make a decision based upon the gifts. So it's all about the gifts here. It all comes down to this crazy little idea that it's about the gifts. One person is looking at the gifts, Rivkah, is looking at the gifts as a sign of the person that's on the other side. That a person that is willing to lavishly give gifts to a person that he doesn't even know based upon his faith in a servant that has faith in a God. Think about that for a moment. So she's looking at the gifts going, this guy on the other end of this thing must be an incredible man of faith to blindly send this man into this country with all of this stuff to ask me if I will go back and marry his son. I wonder if his son is also a man of that kind of faith. Now, she doesn't know that just weeks or months earlier that Isaac was on Mount Moriah. She's probably never heard of Mount Moriah. She doesn't know about Hagar. She doesn't know about Ishmael. She doesn't know about any of those things. She doesn't know that Isaac is old enough that he could have overcome his dad. All she sees is the gifts. And it reminds her, it brings to her thought process the man behind the gifts. On the other hand, Laban is going, I wonder what else I can get out of this transaction. See, he's in it for himself. She's in it for the idea of submitting herself to a man of faith. He's in it to see what he can get from a man of faith. Ah, yes, merchandising. Merchandising, yes, that still happens today. And I only wish that I could say that it didn't happen in Judaism, Christianity, in Messianic Hebrew root circles. But yes, it still does, folks. There are people out there that merchandise. And you and I need to come to the place of discernment. What is it that we need today? It is discernment. I'd like to take you to some verses that I taught on this past Shabbat at Life Assembly. For any of them that are crazy enough to listen to me twice in a week, it may be a little bit on the redundant side for you. But in Jeremiah chapter 23, I read this just a few days ago, and this chapter, I told everyone at Life Assembly, I felt at the beginning of somewhere in the last month, I felt like I was to read Jeremiah. And I have to tell you, I've been going through the book of Jeremiah going, I don't have a clue of what this is talking about. Okay? I mean, is it talking about what happened, or what will happen, or is the answer yes, or is it, well, that was one time, it's not going to happen again, or is there another prophetic scenario that's going to be? I don't have a clue. And then I turn the page to Jeremiah chapter 23, and it's like, this was the reason that I've been reading Jeremiah, and I'm continuing to read it because maybe there's another chapter in here that I'll kind of understand. And so this chapter, first of all, begins with the shepherds. This is, and it's going to go to what is called the Greater Exodus, and that's in verse 7. And you can read this chapter on your own. I'm not going to go into each one of the verses here. But in Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 7, it talks about the Greater Exodus, about coming from the nations. Can you imagine a time in which we will sit down for a Passover meal and no longer even mention Egypt? Now, is that because the Greater Exodus is going to be filled with greater miracles? Or is it, as my dear friend Moshe Kempinski says, that this is talking about a day in which he will not be known as the God of the past, but the God of the present? That he will arise, and his enemies will be scattered, and we will be gathered together in the land once again. And by the way, Jeremiah chapter 32 says, and this is the only time that I can find in the scripture that he says this, I will do this with my whole heart and being. So if you want to know what he's all about, what is it that he will do with his whole heart and being, that is one thing and one thing only, and that is to bring us into the land as a redeemed people. And so it begins, and I'm not looking, I've said this through the years, I'm not looking so much for wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and famines and all those kind of things. What I'm looking for is the first part of Jeremiah chapter 23 to come about, and that is, first of all, that he will destroy the false shepherds, those that have been the Labans, those that have been merchandising, those that have been using the flock. I believe in prosperity. I think prosperity is a great thing, but I do not believe that the prosperity of let me put it in Christian terms, the prosperity of the pulpit should not be on the backs of the people in the pews. And that has happened through the years. He is going to, at some time in history, destroy those who have been using their flocks. I have two prayers. Number one, may it come soon and in my day. Number two, may I not be one of those that has been doing that. That's the second one is a much more serious prayer to me than the first one. Now, from there, it says, I will raise up, the days are coming. This is verse 5. The days are coming, says Yudhe Vavhe, when I will raise a righteous branch of David. Compare that to Zechariah chapter 6, verse 11, and various other places. The branch of David. It is not the same word, but is the same thought. And this is in Isaiah chapter 11, when it talks about the root of Jesse, the trunk, and all of those. I'm not quoting it exactly right now, but the wording in my thoughts, best of my study of Hebrew, is that it is the wording of Isaiah 11 is a green sprout, just the sprouting of, but here we see a branch. It's the maturing of. So we could probably see that as tying that somewhere into Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David. So it's talking about the mature branch that has brought forth leaves and brought forth and brings forth the fruit. Goes in, of course, to the verses I was talking about in verse 7. And then it spends the rest of the time, the rest of this chapter, speaking about the false prophets. Think back to the days of COVID. Oh yes, wonderful days that they were. Think back to all the prophecies that were put onto YouTube. The YouTube prophets that were, could we say, if there's an ad there, somebody's probably getting paid. I don't think there's ads on my YouTube because I don't want to monetize it. If they put ads there, it's not because I want them to, and I don't get paid for doing that. I refuse to monetize that. But think back to all the prophecies that were so-called prophecies and so-called prophets. How many of those things came to pass, guys? Oh, let's just go ahead and wade on out into the deep water here. Way out over my head. How many that prophesied that Donald Trump, this is not a political statement, but how many prophesied that Donald Trump was going to overturn the election and was going to be reinstated? And how's those prophecies working out? And here's the question. Probably not any of you, I would hope not, but for all of those that were prophesying all that stuff, are you still listening to them? I'm not. I'm just out. I figure if you get it wrong 100 times, there's not a reason for me to listen to the 101st, because they're a false prophet. They're in it for the cash. Now, here's one of the interesting things regarding the prophecy is this. In verse 20, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's anger will not abate till he fully accomplishes the purpose of his heart. In the Acharit Hayamim, the last days, you will understand everything. One of my favorite, I've got a few favorite rabbinic statements. One of them is this: you will not know what it is. Now I can't remember it. I just tried to say it. No one knows what is to be until it is. There you go. No one knows what is to be until it is. Well, he won't do anything until he, tells his servants, the prophets. I guess that means that we got a lot of false prophets out there, and prophecy is still done as seen in part. And so we might have an idea of, you go to Ezekiel chapter 37, 38, 39, we got an idea of, but we don't know how it's going to come about. We don't know how he's going to put the puzzle together. We figure he's going to do it like we do. He's going to put the outside, get the corner pieces, then the outside, then he's going to start to put no, he might do it totally different. We know what the ending result, we know what the picture is going to look like in the end. We don't know how the pieces are going to be put in between now and then. And so if somebody tells you that they know what is going to happen, they don't. They don't. Okay? Let me be clear. They don't. You get in trouble by saying don't 3 times. Hopefully mine's with a little bit more passion and understanding than somebody else's. Moving right along. So he says, Regarding these, in verse 25, I have heard what these prophets prophesy lies in my name are saying, I've had a dream, I've had a dream. How long will this go on? A dreamer, a false dreamer. Too much pizza. Even with turkey pepperoni, too much pizza might give you some bad dreams. And then you blame the dream on God. Be careful with dreams. Can God give us a dream? He tells us he's going to, yes. But see, it goes back to where we started with order. We must have people in our lives that we can submit things to help us in discerning what is of the servant, the spirit, and what is of Laban. It's very easy to follow Laban because, see, Laban's name means white, a false purity. Okay. Now, lastly, in verse 30, so I am against the prophets, says Adonai, who steal my words from each other. Yes, I am against the prophets, says Adonai, who speak their own words and add, God said. First of all, you put out a prophecy or a teaching. You put a teaching out. How many people steal it? And I mean, you know, it's somebody takes what I say. I find that flattering. All right, but you know, don't say that you got it. Don't say that, you know, well, I was reading the scripture and no, you heard it from, you know, if I repeat something that Eddie Chumney said, I'm probably going to give reference to Eddie Chumney. Or I may say, you know, I heard a teacher or something like that. If I heard it from somebody else, I'm not going to tell you it's mine because that's not honest. But if you go onto YouTube, I mean, somebody puts a teaching up, somebody puts a prophecy up, and all of a sudden there's 1,000 of them. Why? Because, you know, it's funny. People are too lazy to even get their own false prophecies. They got to find them from somebody else. That is the height of laziness, folks. Or, God said. It's hard to disagree with somebody that said, God told me. I've talked about this so many times. Somebody comes and says, you know, Mike, God told me. Really? He didn't tell me. You know, and I don't know if I trust you to tell me that God told me. But it's like the ultimate name dropper. I find that, you know, it's like a teaching. If you say, well, you know, I've got some thoughts regarding Qumran and the so-called Essene community, and I had a professor that in Hebrew University that I was able to come in to contact through a friend of mine, and they thought that, you know, what I said was right. I was talking to Eddie, and we were going through, and we're on the same page, okay? But that's fine. Maybe we're all wrong in the end. But when I can kind of go, well, you know, Brad used to say, or this person said this, and it's called name dropping. Well, the ultimate name dropping is when we say, God told me, God said. Kind of hard to, because let's face it, folks, when you say God told me, it's a little hard to get out of, isn't it? Because it's like, it's going to take some humility to say that I didn't hear from God right. So let's be kind of careful with that one. And then it says, I am against those who concoct prophecies out of fake dreams. As I finish, remember what Matthew chapter 24 says. Go back and read it. When Yeshua was asked what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age, the first thing he said was this: let no man deceive you. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a place in history where we can either go with the true white of the Ruach, the Spirit, or we can be deceived by the false white of the Labans. And it may be that our greatest strength to not being deceived is to walk in order, God's order, no matter if it goes against society or not. With that, Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. And until then, pray for the shalom of Yerushalayim. We pray over the IDF, the troops, the people, and the land of Israel. May the Father's will be accomplished to the fullness. By the way, that's the kingdom, I think. So until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.